Okay. Hopefully you guys are seeing that okay. All right, so let's get going here. Oh, in fact, hang on, I gotta do one other thing. I just in case somebody does show up in person, I want to have it on the screen here as well. So let me get that turned on. Okay. All right, so what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to go through and talk about this activities management. So, and to give you just a little bit of a background on all of that and how that has worked and blah, 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 why I even teach this class. So I got my license in 1996 and I struggled the first year and a half. Like I really struggled getting my real estate career going. Well, then towards the end of 97, I went to a training that our company was doing that they had brought in this guy from California that was going to come do a training. And in this training, I really resonated with the principles that he taught, which just kind of to give you the background, his background actually was in physics. He was going to be a physicist, wanted to be a rocket scientist, but ended up doing business consulting and specifically for real estate. And part of why I just really resonated with what he had to say was because he took just basic principles and then applied them to real estate. And I really liked that idea. So one of the things that he shared with me was he was talking about what it means to be productive. And we got talking about how really most real estate agents are less than 11%, let's just say 10%, less than 10% productive. So meaning that of the time we spend working, less than 10% of the time we spend working is actually productive time, and we spend it productively. Well, as a result of that, then he launched into and gave me some tools and things that I'm going to give to you guys that will actually help you to either one, get your business up and running, two, if you are struggling or ever feel like you're in a slump, you use this tool, it'll get you out of a slump. Or three, to take your business to the next level. If you'll use these tools, it will do that for you. So, but in order to give you that, I first got to give you some background information. So I'm going to share with you what you should be seeing on your screen for you guys that are on Zoom. What you should be seeing on your screen is this quote here from C. Northcott Parkinson. So C. Northcott Parkinson was lived in England in the 1930s. And he was actually working on his PhD thesis. And part of what he did was he was studying the Royal Navy. And so what I'm going to show you is some stuff that he found. And C. Northcott Parkinson, in essence, really probably is the father of business consulting. This guy kind of created this as part of his PhD thesis, looking at the Royal Navy. Well, what he found is a few things that we call Parkinson's laws. And so we're going to talk about two of the things that he came up with, these laws that he came up with. The first one is his law of expansion. And what he found is this: work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Now, so I'm going to make you guys, since you're, a lot of times with the people on Zoom, I teach to the people in the room, but since there's nobody in the room, you guys have to participate. So what does that mean? When you read that, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion, what do you think that means? And to some extent, Hal, I'm wondering, since Tanner typed in the chat box, if he can't unmute for some reason. So
no worries. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a brain twister. I think to me it means basically you need to be doing something all the time if you want to have, you know, actual work filling your time. You still need to be working all the time.
Okay, good.
Kind
Okay.
of what my does. I don't know.
Okay, good. Any thoughts, Tanner? I don't know if you can unmute or not, and if you can't, if you want to put it in the chat box, then I'll just read what you put there. Or you're not really there. I don't know, one of the two. Or you're still typing. Okay, so while we're waiting on to see if he's typing or not, I'll explain it. So here's what it basically means. Okay, so he said, not really sure, that's hard. Okay, good, yeah. So let me explain it to you. What he found was this, and I'm going to just show you basically how he found this was based on this. My clicker's not working, so hang on, let me
No, you're good.
switch the slide there. Now I got it working. Okay, perfect. So here's what he found. So I'm going to show you what he found, and then I'll explain to you how that relates to what we're talking about, how it relates to real estate. So this is what he was studying. So remember, he was studying the Royal Navy, and this was about 1930 that he's studying this. And what he found was in 1914, there were 62 ships in commission that the Royal Navy had. Well, to support those 62 ships, there were 146 officers and men in the Royal Navy. There were 57,000 dockyard workers, 3,200 dockyard officials and clerks, and 2,000 the Admiralty. So basically the top lever of the leadership. Then he goes in and looks in 1928, so 14 years later, they've dropped now from 62 ships down to 20. Now, granted, it's because in 1914, you're at war. Now the war's over. They get rid of all these ships. So they now only have 20 ships in commission. But to support those 20 ships, so looking at the bottom, you've decreased by 67% the number of ships. You go over to the officers and men, goes from 146,000 down to 100,000, so that only reduced 30%. So you got 60% less ships, but only 30% less people. Dockyard workers actually increased. So you have 67% less ships, but he found that you have now 10% more dockyard workers, 40% more officials and clerks, and 80% more of the Admiralty. Now, why would that happen? Why would you reduce the number of ships in commission by 67%, yet the top layer of management has increased by almost 120%? Any thoughts on that?
Well, they got in early on Amway.
Okay.
No, I think, yeah, they have to sustain those long time salaries is a priority probably too. So they're paying the chiefs a lot more.
Good. Yeah, and good. I love where you're going with it. Here's the other side of it. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So what he found was this, it fits with what you're saying, Hal, is to some extent it's like, okay, we've got all these 146,000 officers and men. Well, we have to promote them because they've been in the Navy. And again, some of this is tied to government. But really, at the end of the day, here's what you will find. If you were to, and I'm talking right now just business in general. We'll bring this to real estate in a second. But just business in general, if it is not managed properly, every single company out there, and any that you've probably worked for, if you pay attention, you'll notice this happens. Over time, if not managed carefully, what happens is the upper management is sitting in a meeting and they start saying, you know what we ought to do is we ought to, and let's just use social media maybe as an example of, we need to start doing some social media marketing. We should go hire somebody to be a social media marketer. So now we're going to go hire somebody to do that. Even if it doesn't necessarily add more business to their bottom line, they go do that. Or they say, we should do a study to figure out blah, blah, blah. And then they go hire somebody. Well, then you because people stay and they're loyal and all of those things, you feel like you have to promote them. If not managed carefully, what will happen is all of these people filtered from these officers of Royal Men to being up to the Admiralty. And if not managed properly, the top levels of management get top heavy. You become top heavy. Now, how does that relate to what we're talking about right here? Well, what he said is, if you don't manage your time effectively, is what he's saying here. So work expands to fill the time available for completion. So here's what it means. If you say to yourself, I am going to go to the office today and I'm going to be there at the office from 7:30 in the morning until, let's say, 5:30 at night. The fact that you say, I'm going to be at the office from 7:30 to 5:30, work will expand to fill that time. So you'll figure out a way to take a project that you're working on and expand it to fill the time available for its completion. Said another way that you'll relate to, when you were in high school and or college and you had a project that you had to work on and the teacher said it's due on this date, you would work on the project until that date. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, it makes a lot of sense. That's a much better way of defining that that statement for sure, and it makes a lot of sense. I find that with myself definitely, Russ. I mean, if I get up and I intend to work, it's like things start happening. If I don't do anything, nothing happens. Yep. Right? Same adage,
Yep. Work will expand to fill the time available for its completion. So, meaning you'll find busy work to do even. So that's the first thing he found is, and so now again, let me come back to what we're talking about today. Productivity is not the same thing as being at work. So just because you're at work doesn't mean you're being productive or effective. So that's the first thing he found is, work will expand to fill the time available for its completion. If you give somebody a deadline to do something, it will generally take them until the deadline to finish that thing. In fact, I'm reading a book right now called The 12-Week Year. And the idea behind it is, instead of setting goals for a year, you only set goals for 12 weeks. Because if we set a huge goal for 12 months, we will then wait until 7, 8, 9 months into it to realize, oh, we're behind schedule. I got to up my prospecting. I got to do a little bit more so that I can hit my goals. Versus if you said, I'm going to do this for 12 weeks. This is my plan for the next 12 weeks. You're more likely to do it because the clock's ticking on you. You feel it coming to an end. That's really the idea of this. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Okay, so now we understand that. Let's go to the next thing. The next thing he came up with, which this is even more of a tongue twister, maybe not tongue twister, but more brain twister for you than anything, is what he called his law of triviality. The law of triviality is this: time spent on any item of an agenda will be an inverse proportion to its importance. So what he found is, when he studied the meetings that the Royal Navy had, that if they put together an agenda of what they were going to talk about in this meeting, the time that was spent on any item of that agenda was in inverse proportion to its importance. Which basically what that means is, the stuff that wasn't very important, they spent a whole bunch of time on, and the stuff that was really important, they spent very little time on. Now, I will tell you again on this, pay attention to next time you go to any meeting, that unless somebody understands this principle, if you go to a meeting, what you will notice is people will put together an agenda and they will put the stuff on the agenda in inverse proportion to its importance. They'll put the least important stuff first and the most important stuff last. And the thinking is, we're going to spend let's hurry and get through this early stuff quickly so that we have time to talk about all the important stuff. But that's not what happens. Instead, what tends to happen is this. So let me, I got one more principle. One more principle, and then I'll explain how it works. This is the Pareto principle, or you've heard it as the 80-20. But Vilfredo Pareto was an Italian economist, and he's the one who came up with this 80-20 rule, where what he found is, for him when he was studying this, is he was studying the factories in Italy. And what he found is that most of the production came, for any project or item, came out of 80% of the production came out of 20% of the factories, which means that the other 20% of the production came out of the other 80% of the factories, meaning there were a few factories that were really efficient and produced a lot, and a whole bunch of factories that didn't produce a whole lot. So that's where this 80-20 rule came from. And so the same thing that ties back to this: time spent on any item of an agenda will be in inverse proportion to its importance. Now, so looking at this, what it says, what this chart says here is these two bars that are to your, I guess if you're looking at it on the screen, to the far left, that go up to 10, would be the two most important things you could do in your day for work. The red line is how much time we spend on them. So for you and I, in terms of real estate, we will spend the least amount of time on these two most important things, and we spend then that red line, the most amount of time on things that aren't very important to our business. Okay? So that's the idea of the 80-20 principle and this law of triviality, where time is spent in inverse proportion to its importance. So again, that means you and I will spend a whole bunch of time on things that aren't that important in our business, and we spend very little amount of time on the things that are important in our business. Okay? So I'm going to give you an example of that. So what I'm going to share with you now is this was a study that was done by the Boston School District, and this was published in the Wall Street Journal. And I can't tell you the name of the study because it'll give away the punchline of what we're going to talk about here for a second. I'll tell you what it was called at the end. But here's the idea of this. So the Boston School District, now let me just make sure you guys understand to help with this. Who makes up a school district board? Who are the people who end up on the board at a school district?
I guess past principals, maybe? No, the parents, right?
Yeah, typically it's parents. Most of the time it's just parents who wanted to get involved. And sometimes they do have some administrators there, but usually it's parents that go run for office to get elected to these positions. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through this. So in this study that they put in the Wall Street Journal, the Boston School District at their meeting had two items they were going to be discussing. The first item, or one of the two items, it wasn't first actually, was a $1.5 million annex. They were going to build on to one of the schools. The other item, which I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but the expense of this item was going to be $200,000. Now, the difference between the high bid and the low bid on each of those, so for the building, the difference between the high bid and the low bid of the $1.5 million annex was $200,000. So you got these bids, and the difference between the high and the low is $200,000, okay? They ended up taking the high bid and paying $200,000. The item that was on their agenda that was $200,000, the difference between the high and the low bid was $10,000. So in essence, you got $200,000 item. Difference between the high and the low bid is it's going to be $190,000 or $200,000. Okay, so we're either going to spend $190,000 or we're going to spend $200,000. The other item was a $1.5 million, where the difference is either 1.3 million, or we're going to spend 1.5. Now, what ended up happening is this meeting was supposed to last for 1 hour. So it's a 1 hour meeting. The meeting, they spent 57 and a half minutes. So remember, it's supposed to be a 1 hour meeting. They spent 57 and a half minutes talking about the $200,000 item that I haven't told you what it is yet. They spent 57 and a half minutes arguing, should we spend 190,000 or should we spend 200,000? Okay. They then end up taking the low bid. So they only spent 190,000. They then spent 7.5 minutes. So the meeting ran over because it was supposed to be a 1 hour meeting. They spent 57.5 minutes on the $200,000 item. They spent 7.5 minutes discussing the $1.5 million annex, and then they just took the high bid. So they spent $1.5 million on the high item, and they spent $190,000 on the low item. Now, here's the question for you guys. What do you think they were talking about for 57.5 minutes that saved them $10,000 and then they only had 7.5 minutes and they took the high bid. Now, if you understand this, you'll understand why you do what you do in your business too. So, but first, before I explain why, what do you think they were talking about for $200,000? Or excuse me, the $10,000 difference?
Salaries.
More simple than that.
We wish. I don't know, like books or maintenance or something, or
Even more simple than that. I'll just give it. Since it's only you and I communicating, since Tanner's just typing.
I got my mic to work finally.
Oh, there we go. Sweet. Okay. Any
I
thoughts?
changed the settings on my phone. I don't know, but I feel like it's going to be something really small and important.
Yep. You know what it was? Toilet paper. They spent 57.5 minutes arguing over toilet paper to save $10,000. Like, should we use 1-ply or 2-ply? And that's too scratchy, and like all that. They spent 57.5 minutes arguing over toilet paper, and then they only spent 7.5 minutes, and then they took the high bid. Now, why? So here's the thing. Why do you think they would spend 57.5 minutes arguing over toilet paper, 7.5 minutes on the most important item? Now remember, going back to Parkinson's law of triviality, time spent on any item of an agenda will be in inverse proportion to its importance. See, the time they spent talking about the toilet paper was like, that wasn't that important, what type of toilet paper we're going to get. But the $200,000 item really was probably more important, yet they spent very little time on it. Now, why? Why would they spend, now keep in mind, these are just parents of the kids, okay? Why would they spend 57.5 minutes talking about toilet paper and go with the low bid, then 7.5 minutes and take the high? What do you think?
It's going to be like they wanted the best. I don't know, like they wanted the best building for their kids.
Okay, good. That's part of it for sure. Part of it is they looked at it and said, okay, this building is where our kids are going to be, and if there's an earthquake or this or that, or maybe it was some of the amenities, like any of that kind of stuff could have been. But so you're right on that, is they were looked at it and go, we should probably take the high bid on that. But why? Like, meaning, yes, it's partially it's because it's their kids. Totally get that. But there's more to it than that even.
Is it possibly a little bit of vanity? Toilet paper versus a nice building?
Okay, could be. But let me ask it. Here's how I will explain it to you. If either of you have purchased toilet paper in the last, well, let me just, have either of you purchased toilet paper in the last few months?
Yeah, absolutely. I have.
Have either of you written a check for $1.5 million in the last few months?
No, I went.
I just got people on Zoom. I finally have someone here in person with me too,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean you guys are off the hook.
Sorry, Ruby asked me to help people role play, so.
Yeah, hey, who's more important, Ruby or me?
You.
All right, then you
Obviously.
tell her no, Nick. Okay, so you're going to be a little behind with what we're
Oh, it's
talking
all
about.
good.
But
Yeah,
that's fine.
I totally get it.
So,
Hey, Russ,
yes,
you
go
are more important. That's why there's less time spent.
oh, you kind of cut out again. Say that again.
I said you are more important. That's why there's less time spent with you.
That's right.
With what you're
Good
teaching.
point. Yeah, thanks. Good tie into what we're talking about. Yes. Good point. Okay, so what it boils down to is this. Every one of those people on that school board is familiar with toilet paper. Gabe's like, what the heck are you talking about toilet paper? Every person on that board is familiar with toilet paper. But again, because they're parents, they don't understand building codes and zoning codes and what type of materials that you should use to build a building. But they understand what it means to use single-ply toilet paper or whatever. So because of that, what this boils down to, so what we're talking about, Gabe, is this principle right here of Parkinson's law of I'm going to turn the light off so you can see better. So Parkinson's law of triviality is time spent on any item of an agenda will be in inverse proportion to its importance. You spend the most amount of time talking about the least important things, the least amount of time on the most important things. So what happened is this Boston school district spends 57 and a half minutes arguing about toilet paper because they're familiar with it. They understand it. Every one of us could argue effectively on toilet paper because we all know it. But when it comes to building a building and spending $1.5 million to build this building, they don't know which is better or worse. So their assumption is if we spend more money, our kids will be safer. So really what it boils down to is because they are familiar with it. Now, how does that real estate to us? Well, what we're talking about. What are the things in terms of real estate that you are most familiar with? So think about it, and in fact, let me even ask it this way. In real estate school, did they teach you how to sell real estate?
Nope.
What did they teach you?
How to pass the test,
Yeah,
how to not get in trouble.
they taught you how to pass the test, taught you laws, how to not go to jail. All of those kinds of things is what they were teaching you in real estate school. So therefore, you get your real estate license, and unless you have some type of a background with it, which, so like Gabe that's here with me, his dad's a realtor, so you might have a little bit more of an edge than somebody that didn't because you've kind of been around it your whole life. But because we're not familiar with it, what do we then end up spending our time during the day? Now, remember, let me go back to the very beginning for you guys on Zoom too. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So if work expands to fill the time available for its completion and we work on things in inverse order of their importance, we're going to spend more time on the things that aren't important and a little time on the things that are important. What are we going to spend our time doing now that we understand that? Now, not now that we understand that, before we understood it. What does that mean we spend our time doing? Because work's going to expand to fill the time available, and we're going to work on the least important things most and first, and the most important things last and least. So what
Work on the comfort zones first.
Say that again. Sorry, I cut out.
Work on the comfort zone items first and not the ones that get out of
Yeah,
your zone.
perfect. What are those comfort zone items for us in real estate?
For me, it was like the trainings that like Entry 21 had and like market research.
Perfect.
That was really similar to what I was doing with like the test.
Perfect. That's exactly right. It's easy to come to class. Like none of you guys were scared, I don't think, to come to class today,
I'm
right?
so scared.
Yeah, Gabe was.
No, I'm just
That's why he was
kidding.
late. He was so scared. He had to convince himself. But yeah,
Scared my face to go up on the meeting. I just wanted to be, back in the background.
that's right. The reason you're on Zoom is even more comfortable, right? Because we can hide even better on Zoom. So yeah, what happens is because we're not familiar with it. Well, actually, let me ask it this way. What are the things that we're least familiar with? What are the things that are least familiar to you in real estate? At least for new.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, at least when you're new, what are the things that are least familiar? And maybe even still to some extent, no matter how long you've been licensed.
I think every time whether you move a brokerage or whatever you do, it's, working on, it's not so much cold calling, but just relationship building and doing
Okay.
the work, early work to put into relationship building to, reap the rewards later. It may be years, but
Okay, good. So how exciting is it to jump on the phone and call for sale by owners?
yeah, I
Exciting.
probably want to be on Zoom to do that. Or door knocks, or whatever. Yeah.
Or go out and knock on doors. So what Tanner, what did you say?
I said not exciting.
Yeah, so notice work expands to fill the time available for its completion. So, and we're going to work on the most important things we're going to work on least and last. The least important things we're going to work on first and most. So what tends to happen is we want to work on, I'm going to do a CMA. That's comfortable. I can jump on and work on a CMA. And we feel like we're being productive when we do it. So now keep in mind what we're talking about today is how do we know how productive we are? And that's what we're gonna get into next, is how do we know how productive we are, and how do we keep track of that? How do we use that as a way to help us? Because human nature, just like I talked to you guys about back here on this Royal Navy, human nature is going to be to do what they did. The Royal Navy reduced the number of ships, but they still continued to promote people and give them higher paying jobs and better titles and all that stuff, just because that's what's comfortable, that's what we should do. Versus with us in real estate, so what are the things that are going to, so let me ask it this way, and then I'm going to shut off the screen share and write on the board. But what are the things in real estate that if you did them consistently and you know it's going to bring business to you, what would those things be?
Prospecting.
Yeah, prospecting.
Door knocking, cold call.
Exactly. Notice that it's the prospecting are the things that are most important, that are going to generate the most income for us. Oops. Those are the things that are going to tend to generate the most income for us. Yet, notice that we don't spend a ton of time doing those things because
It's hard.
it's hard. It's not familiar.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. Notice that. See, the things that are comfortable in this business are going to be the things that don't create an income that you want to create. So now, with that, let's jump into this. And I'm going to show you guys what it looks like. So I'm going to I want you guys to give me, so hang on, get this screen up here. Okay, so think of it this way, is we're going to talk about 3 different categories here, okay? And what I want to do is let's go through and talk about the comfortable things first. So what are the things in real estate that you are comfortable doing? So we already said, go to class. What else? So I think somebody said CMA. That's easy. Like meaning put it together, maybe not present it, but.
Property search.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I'm just going to say MLS.
Maybe like social media.
Okay, good. Social media.
Russ, it's like educating the client, but again, that boils down to getting them on the phone to be able to educate them. So I just find that so many people
What if I just,
know how to do it, you know?
yeah, what if I just said like advertising, like sending out a mailer?
Sure, perfect.
Comfortable, right? Okay, now, so let's go through and talk about what are the things that are not comfortable. You guys already said prospecting. So I'm going to just put prospecting there, and we're going to include in that for sale by owners, expired, just listed, just sold.
Door knock.
Yeah, door knock. Cold call, I guess, let's say that, which anytime I bring up cold call, I always have to emphasize to you guys, check the do not call list, follow all those do not call laws. There are people out there right now. I haven't heard about it in Utah, but we have, with other Century 21s across the country, have brought up that there are people out there like doing setups for agents where they can then go turn them in for violating the do not call list. So make sure anytime cold call comes up, I always have to say, make sure you're checking the do not call list because you don't want to get fined for that. It's $11,000. Wow.
How do you find the do not call list?
If you go to donotcall.gov. So donotcall.gov, you can either do phone numbers individually or you could upload like a spreadsheet and it'll tell you if they're on the do not call.
You just search up a number.
Yep. On donotcall.gov, you can just type in a phone number and it'll pop up either red or green. If it's red, don't call them. Okay. So what other things do we do in real estate that maybe are not as familiar? We're a little more nervous about doing, at least initially. Maybe over time, some of this stuff gets better, but even still, it's not our ideal thing we want to do.
For me, my team has like the top 50.
Okay.
It's been hard for me to just like get past like calling my SOI and just like telling them what like I do real estate now and adding them to my top 50 and stuff. It's hard for me for some reason because
Okay.
I'm just getting used to calling people still. So
Good. I'm gonna still throw in SOI calling under this list, under this site.
even though it's like easier than
Yeah,
the other ones,
yes, it's easier than others, but sometimes not, actually. There's a lot of agents that, and even for me, for a long time, I was like, I would rather go talk to a stranger
Yeah.
than call somebody I know.
because I don't want them in my head. I'm like, I don't want them to like
Think I'm bugging them.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
like I want them to still like me, but
exactly.
they all like me, so they're
Yeah.
not going to lose interest
Right.
or something.
Okay, good. What else? What are the other things that we do that are, let me say it this way. What other things do we do in real estate that are money makers? Because we don't have anything in this column yet.
I was going back to basics, Russ, what I was thinking at first, inspection process can be uncomfortable.
Okay. So I'm going to just put on that, for that, I'm going to just say write contracts. How's
Yeah,
that?
What's
Exactly.
this one on the left?
I haven't told you yet.
Oh,
I'm going to tell you.
what about like open houses?
Okay. I'm going to put open houses under prospecting. And actually,
setting appointments, under prospect as well. Or,
yes, setting appointments, because that should be the idea of all this. Now, I'm going to put open houses in this column, but they might also even end up in this column, and I'll explain why. So what?
Presence at charitable events in your community. Trying to establish yourself with charitable organizations that you like.
I'm going to put that one over here and call that networking.
Perfect.
Good. What else? You guys aren't even getting on the stuff where we really make money.
Really?
Well, writing contracts. What do you have to do before you write a contract? Well, and when I say contracts, I'm meaning, it could be, let's say buyers. That's the buyer. Let's put a B there for.
representation agreement.
Okay, good. How about, I'm going to just say listing presentation. And really, we could say buyer too, so /buyer. So buyer or listing presentations, good.
I did have luck last year sitting open houses for other agents and being able to bring a buyer.
Okay, so I'm going to have, I put open houses under this column, and potentially I'm going to say they fall under this column too, and I'll explain why in a minute.
Perfect.
So what else?
I'm
How about,
not big on my skill set isn't so well suited as for listings as it is for buyers, Russ, but I'd say like staging and that whole process of getting it on the market's got to fit somewhere that's stressful.
I'm going to put that as part of our listing presentation. How about price reductions?
That's good. Yep. Definitely.
How about going to closing? Which, like, not that that's scary, because at that point it shouldn't be, because you already done everything. But
Yeah.
okay, can you think of anything else that we would put that would fit, like with writing a purchase contract, and maybe I even just say negotiating
Yeah.
the contract? Can you think of anything else that would fit in that category? I don't know that there is. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything.
No, I think negotiation wraps up a lot of it because you've got, a lot of stress always going into not knowing what you're dealing with on the other agent until you actually meet them and such too. So that's all part of it, but.
Okay, good. Okay, so now let's talk about these three columns. Because remember, I started this whole thing by saying less than 11%. Agents are less than 11% productive. Remember I said that? And I said, let's just call it 10. Let's just say that 10% of the time agents are actually productive. So when I say that, what I'm referring to is, let's call this column right here productive. When we do those things, we're being productive. When we do these things, we're being indirectly productive. These things over here, now, before I tell you what I call this, keep in mind there is a distinction between non-productive and not important. Okay, so I'm going to call these non-productive. Now, keep in mind, non-productive is not the same as not important. Do not hear that I'm saying anything in that column is not important. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's not productive. And I'll show you why in a second. Does it matter how, in fact, let's do it now. Does it matter how much time you spend in class if you don't ever go and prospect? Like, there are people, like over my time, I've spent the last, gosh, I'm coming up on 20 years, which is really crappy to say because that's a long time, but almost 20 years of training real estate agents. And here's what I will tell you, like there are some agents that come to class over and over and over and over and over. Now, none, you guys don't fall into this, but there are people who come over and over and over and over and over to class. Why? Well, because it's comfortable and work expands to fill the time available for its completion. They can go home at night and feel like, well, I worked really hard today because I attended all these classes. Like I got some great material. But if you don't ever actually put it into play, that's where it's now going to be non-productive. If all you did all day long was CMAs, how much money would you make? Like you never went and presented them. Like you just were constantly sitting down and like, oh, I wonder how much that house over there is worth. I wonder how much this house is worth. You're not going to make any money. How about just researching on the MLS? Now, again, keep in mind, I'm not saying these things are not important. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they're non-productive. And what I mean by non-productive is if that's all you did all day long, you're not going to make any money. Now, so let's transition over to this productive side, though. Could you imagine, so how long have you had your license?
I've had my realtor license going on 4 years. Before that, I actually sold REOs for a servicing company for 20 years. I was on the bad end of it, but yeah, I'm quite familiar with the whole process and everything. But yeah, just 4 years on the happy end.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I needed to know you during the REO time then.
Sorry. Oh, we're back.
So yeah, I actually did a lot of REO properties for banks, which did you work for one here in town?
I don't love the name. They were good to me, but it's fine. They were owned by Credit Suisse eventually. It was Select Portfolio.
Select. Oh, okay. So because
The old hockey building out by the Maverick Center.
Yeah.
I moved into that weird building out there. But yeah, anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I used to do a lot with EquiCredit is who I did a lot for. But anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Very familiar. Yep.
Yeah. So okay. Imagine though if all day long you were negotiating purchase contracts. How much money do you think you'd make in this business if all day, not just one contract, but you were just like every hour you were negotiating a different real estate purchase contract?
Truckloads.
Yeah. How about if most of your day was spent on listing presentation or buyer present? Every hour you were meeting with a new seller or a new buyer.
That's very productive too.
So how about if you had so many listings and, you know, hopefully they're priced right, but if not, you are spending 1 hour during the day meeting with sellers or talking to sellers about getting them to reduce the price. What about this one? What if every hour for 8 hours, every single hour for 8 hours, you went from one closing to the next. So you went to 8 closings every day.
I would say that's utopia.
Oh, you would be making tens of millions of dollars if you.
Yeah.
See, that's the idea of this productive. Now, remember we said time spent on any item of an agenda or a work will be spent you will spend the most amount of time on the least important things. This column. We'll spend the least amount of time on the most important things, which is this column. Now, here's the question though. Where does this stuff come from? How do we get listing and buyer presentations? How do we get contracts to negotiate?
The middle column then directly.
It's from doing this, right? So the challenge is if we don't do the indirectly productive, we won't have any productive. So now with that in mind, I'm going to give to you now this formula, okay? So, but keep in mind, This I like to call P time. This I like to call I time. And this is N time. So what I'm going to share with you now is what I like to call a PIN, P-I-N. Okay, so it's based on that. Is ultimately what we need to be doing is keeping track of our time to figure out how much time every day do I spend doing productive items, how much time do I spend doing indirectly productive, and how much time do I spend doing non-productive things. Okay? Now, with that in mind, we already just talked about you can't really control this P time without first controlling the I time, the indirectly productive. So here's what I'm going to challenge you to do is, and I'm going to, well, actually, let me tell you the story first. Okay. So when I first learned this, the guy that trained me in it, he had said to me, what you want to do is you need to keep track of your time in 15-minute increments. So every 15 minutes, stop and write down what you did during the last 15 minutes. And then at the end of that 15 minutes, write down, was it productive? Meaning, was it from this column? Was it indirectly productive? If it was something from this column, or was it non-productive, something from this column? Now, he said if you'll do that, you will notice your income will go up dramatically. Now, here's the cool thing. Remember I said to you that agents are less than 11% productive? Top producing agents. So let me make sure I'm even clear on that. I don't think I said that. Some of the top producing agents are less than 11% productive, meaning they're spending less than 11% of their time doing these things, but they're making a good income. The top, like Brian Burnett, that's in our St. George office that made, I think, $2.8 million last year from selling real estate. My guess is, and I never have had him track it, he may track it, I don't know, but I would be willing to bet you that even on this, for him to make $2.8 million, I'll bet you he is not more than 30% productive. Which what that means is he's only spending 30% of his time doing this. So now keep in mind this for a second. If agents making a good income, and I would define that as probably 200 to more thousand in real estate, are only 11% productive. So if somebody's making $200,000 by being 11% productive, to go from 200,000 to 2 million is only going from 11% productive to 30% productive. Like, can you see that you don't have to tweak this too much, the amount of time spent being productive? You don't have to tweak that too much to have your income blow up. So what's the secret to it is what we're going to talk about. See, we can't really control, and when I say you can't really control, you can, but in a roundabout way. If you don't do any prospecting, are people just going to call you? Like, if you got your real estate license and you never told a soul, is anybody ever going to call you and be like, hey, come list my house? If nobody knows you're an agent, nobody's ever going to call you. So you're not going to have, my point is, you don't get this productive time without doing the indirectly productive stuff. So here's what's important, is what you want to do is keep track of your time, these two added together. So every day, so now let me go back to, I told you that the guy that taught me in this said to me, I want you to keep track of what you're doing during the day. And at the end of every day, you have to total up this, your total number of hours. So total hours worked, total hours that you worked, you got to write it down every day. Then I want you to put down how much of those total hours was P time, was, these items here. How much of your time was spent doing I time, which is these items up here. And then by default, whatever is left over ends up being under the N time category. So really, what I'm saying is, you don't actually have to worry about the N time. Because remember, work expands to fill the time available for its completion. End time will take care of itself. It'll show up all on its own. And why is that? So let me show you why that is. If I go and prospect, and I spend, let's say, 2 or 3 hours today prospecting, or let's just say I set an appointment. Every day I prospect, I don't go home until I set an appointment. If I set an appointment, that I time is going to lead to productive time, right? That every time I set an appointment, it's going to lead me to being productive because I'm going to now go on appointments to do this stuff. Well, what happens as soon as you get a listing? What do you have to do?
Start working.
You got to start marketing it, right? I got to come back to the office and I got to put it in .loop and I got to get all the forms filled out and I got to get it submitted and get it on the MLS and I got to get pictures ordered and I might do some staging. Like notice that as soon as you get this productive time going, it creates non-productive time. See, productive time is going to automatically create non-productive time because now you got to go do all this stuff. So really, doing home inspections falls under over here. Going to a home inspection would fall under here because now you get you got a buyer and you got them under contract. You got to go show up for the end of that home inspection for the home inspector to tell the buyer what's going on, and like you got to go turn in earnest money and all. You got to go order the preliminary title report. All of that stuff is non-productive. So this is what happens with most agents. Most agents' production looks like this. And I'm going to show you why that is. Because they come to a class like this and or anything we do and we say you got to prospect, you got to prospect, you got to prospect. Okay, so now you start prospecting. So I'm doing I time, I'm doing I time, I'm doing I time. And we already said I time leads to what?
P time.
To the P time. So now I start going on presentations, but I'm still prospecting. Well, now I've got a listing or I get a buyer and that leads to what we just said, non-productive time. So now I got to start doing that non-productive stuff.
It goes back down.
And because I've got to do all this non-productive stuff and because work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion, I don't really want to prospect because we work on things in inverse order to their importance. So now I start doing all this end time stuff because I got to do that. And then I go to my closing. And you know what we call this moment right there? You know what that's called?
Closing.
Well, yes. But as soon as the closing's over, you know what it's called? That's the oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Because
Where's my next dollar coming from?
yeah, that's right. You nailed it, Hal. It's like, oh shit, now what? And so what do we have?
Celebration time is short these days.
So then we start doing I time again, and we get P time and I time and P time, and then now that starts to generate some end time and more end time, and then that's why agents do this. The reason agents sit and do this is because we don't keep track of our time. See, if ideally what should happen is our income should look like that. That's what should happen. And it will happen if you will keep track of your time. Now, what you want to keep track of is every day, how many hours did I work? Now, my definition of work is if you think you're doing real estate. And the challenge that we have with this today, in today's world, is Zoom, by the way, is because it's easy to attend meetings and be other places and all that kind of stuff. And I should blame it on COVID, not Zoom. But COVID created this scenario where a lot of agents are like, hey, I figured out I can work from home and make money. So I'm just going to keep working from home. So you do have to separate from how much time am I spend working? Like you can still, even if you're doing it from home, which is fine, I don't care, that's fine. But you still have to have kind of this separation of when am I working and keep track of that versus I'm out mowing the lawn. See, if you're out mowing the lawn, you're not working. Or if you are out mowing the lawn and you're counting and you do it, let me say it that way. If you're mowing the lawn during your work time, you decide what that work time is. But if you're doing it during work time, you get to keep track of it as actually the other thing that we haven't put up here. There's another category called CP, counterproductive. See, going and mowing the lawn during your work time is counterproductive. So that actually is even worse than non-productive. But okay, if you will keep track of your time though, and what we're looking for is this. If every day of your total hours, now I get it, keep in mind, I know this is not going to happen every day. So I know that. I know this is not going to happen every day. But if you average it out over, say, a month, you'll be able to tell the story. See, for me, if you keep track of your time and show me what you're doing with your time, I can 100% tell you why you're either making money or not making money. And it's an easy story to tell by keeping track of your time. And all I need to know is how many total hours are you working? Of those total hours, how many were productive and indirectly productive? But I'm not concerned with the number of hours. You will notice during this class, I will never tell you how many hours you need to work. I'm never going to tell you. But what I am going to tell you is of those total hours that you do work, your P time and the I time, these two categories added together, need to equal 60% or greater of your time. Now notice that allows for 40% of your time to still be non-productive. Now remember, non-productive is not the same thing as not important, right? It's not the same. But if whatever that total hours you work in a month, here's what I promise you. I will promise you this. If you keep track of your time, and again, I did it every 15 minutes, and I'm going to tell you this more of the story of that in a second. But if at the end of the month, you can take the total hours you worked in a month, and you can say, of those total hours I worked, what percentage was either I time or P time? I don't care which. It can be any combination. See, if I'm a brand new agent, I'm not going to really have much productive time, but I can have a whole lot of indirectly productive. There's plenty of time for that as a new agent. So I can do plenty of this stuff to then generate the productive stuff. So if at the end of the month you look at it and you're noticing that this is below 50%, if these two added together are below 50%, you're in trouble. That's what it means.
So when you say like 60% of your time, are you talking about 60% of the day or 60% of like your work?
Of your work day.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So like, that's where for me, I'm saying the first thing you got to do is figure out what's my schedule. Yeah. You got to put together, this is what my schedule is going to be.
Yeah.
And then once you have your schedule, now you could say, okay, my work day is going to be 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12, like whatever it is, I don't care. I don't care what the number is, but whatever it is, let's just use 10 because it makes the math easier. If I'm going to say I'm going to work 10 hours a day, then 6 of the hours, at least 5 of the hours need to be spent in one of these two categories.
Yeah.
If not, that you're going to play this game. If you want this game where your income continues to rise, you keep track of it and make sure, because remember, I just said, if you closely manage it, you could do this. And here's the thing, one of two things. Either quit kidding yourself you're at work and don't, when you create the schedule, don't say I'm working. If the idea of work is show up here at the office and then go to lunch for 2 hours with agents, like that's not work. That's work expanding to fill the time available for its completion. See, instead, if what we did is said, okay, I'm going to work, and again, just to keep the numbers and math easy, I'm going to work 10 hours a day. I have to schedule in to where I have built into my schedule 60% being this. So now let me go back to Brian Burnett real quick and let me explain to you what his schedule looks like. Brian Burnett will prospect from 8 o'clock until noon pretty much every day. So there's 4 hours, right? So now we got 4 hours of eye time right there for him. Then he's going to try to schedule 2 appointments from this category every single day. So now he's going to get 2 hours then of productive time every single day. Well, now if you notice, and I don't know that he does 10 hours a day, but let's just say that it's 10 hours because I think he wants to be home at 6 o'clock every day, and I think he starts prospecting 8 o'clock every day. So if you add those two together, you come up with 6. He is 60% productive, or excuse me, between indirectly productive and productive. But notice though, even still what I said, if he's doing 10 hours and 2 of it is productive, that means that he's only 20% productive. That means he was 40% indirectly productive, which means that he still had time for 40% of non-productive stuff. So notice what I'm saying here. 20% productive time and he makes $2.8 million. Like, could you do that? Could you spend 20% of your time being productive?
Yeah.
And well, the answer to that is yes, but you're going to have to spend time doing indirectly productive stuff first.
Mm-hmm.
That's the stuff we don't want to do. So can you get yourself to do the indirectly productive stuff? So now let me finish my story about this. So when I first learned this, the guy said to me, okay, I want you to keep track of your time, 15-minute increments. Now, for a long time when I would train this, I felt bad telling people you need to keep track of your time in 15-minute increments. Now, here's what I did. And luckily for us today, this is so much easier than it would have been back when I learned to do this. Just lucky for me, I have always kind of been a runner. I actually don't like it, but I've just kind of always been a runner. I had a watch that was an Ironman triathlete watch. And so on my watch, it had a timer that you could set so that it would beep. Every 15 minutes, it would beep. So what I did is I would set that. The moment I started work, so as soon as for me, I always considered it work when I was at the office or out showing properties or listing presentation. As soon as I walked in the office, bam, start my timer. And then every time it beeped, I would go and write down. Now I'm going to give to you guys a paper, or at least Gabe. I don't know about you guys on Zoom. We'll see. You guys on Zoom have to come get it from me. That's how we'll do it. So I'll give it to you. You got to come get it. I created this paper, but he said to me, you got to write down every 15 minutes what you did. And then after you write down what you did, you got to either put it, was it one of these things, in which case it was productive? Was it one of this, indirectly productive, or was it, at the end of the day, if it's not these two, it's indirectly productive. Like, you don't need to worry about what's in this list, because anything that's not prospecting or, and I didn't say this column, the thing this column has in common, notice every one of these, we should be face-to-face with a client in a selling situation. We're face-to-face in an appointment where we're going to ask somebody to sign something. Every one of these, you're going to ask somebody to sign something at the end of the appointment. That's what makes it productive, is you're asking somebody to sign something. Anytime you go to an appointment with a plan that I'm going to ask them to sign something, productive.
So really productive stuff is just you're going to have to be face to face.
Typically, it's going to be face-to-face.
Yeah.
There are a few exceptions, but very few.
Yeah.
Typically, it's face-to-face. You're going to ask them to sign something. That's what makes it productive. Think about it that way. Now, so here's what happened. I walk in the office, I hit the button. Then for me, so I was starting actually at 7:30 in the morning. So at 7:30, I'd start the timer. First thing I would do is I would go sit down at my computer at the office, and I would print off the expired listings. Then I would go back to the workroom, and we had these books that were like this thick called the Coles Directory, where what we would do is I would go through and find phone numbers for each of those expired listings. Well, that half an hour that I was doing that, after 15 minutes, my timer would go off, so I would just start it again. And then I either wrote it down right then, or when I got back to my office, the half an hour later, I would write down looking up phone numbers for expired listings. Which category is that going to fall under? P, I, or N? Looking up phone numbers for expired.
The end.
N, correct. So now immediately, first half hour of my day, end time. But remember, non-productive is not the same thing as counterproductive or not important.
Yeah.
So that was still important. I had to do it because I couldn't do my indirectly productive without it. Then I would get on the phone and I would prospect from 8 o'clock until I set an appointment, however long that took. Every 15 minutes, I would stop and write down. So if I was prospecting, my watch beeped, I would write down, for sale by owner, I'd write expired or whatever it was, but then I would put a little I next to it. And then I would go to the next thing that I would do. 15 minutes later, I'd write it down. At the end of the day, I totaled up how many total hours did I work? What percentage of that ended up being productive? What percentage was indirectly productive? And once you figure out those, everything that's left over is non-productive. So you don't have to worry about calculating this. If you'll calculate these two together, and figure out their percentage added together, automatically tells you what this percentage is. Okay? So here's where the light bulb turned on for me though. This was a Monday morning. I had gotten a new listing over the weekend. So I needed to go to the title company in order a preliminary title report. Similar to us in this building, the title company was in the same building I was in. So it's Monday morning. I get there at 7:30. I go look up the expireds. It's now 8 o'clock. I start calling for an hour. So I call from 8 to 9, and all the while writing down my half an hour of end time, then an hour of I time. So it's now 9 o'clock. Well, at 9 o'clock, I know that my escrow officer is going to be over at the title company, and I need to go order the preliminary title report. So at 9 o'clock, I quit prospecting. I walk over to the title company. I say to Jeff, who was my escrow officer, hey, Jeff, I got a new listing. Let me give you the information. I give it to him. Timer goes off. Beep, 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 beep. I hit reset. I've spent now 15 minutes ordering a preliminary title report. So on my piece of paper, preliminary title report, and now the thing I didn't do is I didn't bring the paper with me. So I left it at my desk. So when it beeped, I was like, okay, I just got to remember that I was ordering a pre-R half an hour. Beep. So then Jeff and I proceed to talk, and my watch beeps again. We proceed to talk, my watch beeps. It happens a few times. I get done. I'm walking back to my office. I can still see, I know exactly where I was at when the light bulb hit me. So I'm walking along, and in fact, I'm almost just in this hallway, and my watch beeps, and I look down, and I reset it, and right then I look at the time. Now remember, I went over to his office at 9 o'clock to order a preliminary title report. Should take 15 minutes or less. I look at my watch as I'm walking back to my desk. It's now 11 o'clock.
Wow.
I spent 2 hours talking to Jeff. See, work expands to fill the time available for its completion. See, what ended up happening is I right then realized I just spent 2 hours visiting with Jeff. Now, Jeff and I had kids about the same age, and so we were talking sports and talking about our kids' games and blah, blah, blah. 2 hours, though. And I remember going, is that really where I want to spend 2 hours of my day? Would I rather take 2 hours and do that with him? Or would I rather knock out my prospecting and any appointments and just go home? Go golfing, like go do something else. I mean,
Yeah.
golfing with Jeff, whatever, but is that really where, like, see, before that, I would go to work and I would have, if I wasn't keeping track of my time and you had asked me, how long did you just go spend talking to Jeff? I would have probably said 45 minutes to an hour. Like if I wasn't keeping track, I would have thought, oh, I spent 45 minutes talking to Jeff. That's okay. But I realized that was not what happened. See, we don't realize how ineffective we are or non-productive we are if we don't keep track.
Yeah.
Now, if you're worried about keeping track in 15-minute increments, let me tell you this. I end up dealing with the attorneys. If we have issues here at the company, I've got a couple of different attorneys that I can call. They bill us by 1/10 of an hour. So said another way, they have to keep track every 6 minutes of what they're doing. So be grateful I'm not telling you got to keep track every 6 minutes. But the way the attorney makes money is they are supposed to get so many billable hours in, and they have to do that in 6-minute increments. And so for an attorney, if they have to get 8 hours of billable time in, they might have to work 12 hours to get that 8 hours of billable time in. See, if we approached it the same way, if we said for us, hey, I got to get, in Brian Burnett's case, 6 hours in today of either indirectly or productive, like stop and think about that for a minute. Even if you just said, I have to get in 4 hours today of either indirectly productive or productive time, and I can't go home until I do it, you would be more effective with your time because you would stop and go like, I don't want to go visit with Jeff. I want to get my indirectly productive and productive time in so I can go home. That's how we would approach it. Okay. So I have here, and for Tanner, you and Hal will have to come get it for me. I'll hold it up though so you can maybe kind of see it, sort of. So I'm going to get you closer to that. So catch me if I fall.
Okay.
Here's what it looks like is this. Wrong way.
Yeah.
So,
I see.
and then down at the bottom, here if I can get it high enough and use the right spot, I've got spots here for total time, indirectly time, productive time. And it's broken down in 15-minute increments. So what I want you to do, well, if you want to be more productive and effective and make more money in this business, I want to challenge you for the next month. For me, I did this actually, when I committed to doing it, I committed to doing it for 2 weeks, but I did it for months. Because when I realized how much more money it was going to make me, I became very committed to doing this because I was like, hey, if I'm going to be at the office, I either want to be productive or I want to go home. Now, keep in mind, like I said, you're still going to have to order preliminary title reports. You're still going to have to fill out paperwork. You're still going to have to do all this kind of stuff. But the other thing to point out that hopefully will help you see on this, if you wanted to hire an assistant to put together a flyer for you, how much are you going to pay them per hour? Just give me I mean, I'm not looking for an exact answer, just about. How much?
$20 an hour.
Okay, yeah, let's say $20 an hour. I love it. So stop and think about it. When anytime you're doing anything in this non-productive area, you could be, well, think of it this way. You're making, quote unquote, you're not, but you're making $20 an hour. If though you said, how much time do I spend working with a buyer or a seller? We're done, dude.
I know. I'm on knocking, so
You've been out. Okay.
my activities are good.
So you were doing this, good.
Yeah.
So if though you said, well, in fact, since you just walked in, Aubrey, let me ask you this. How much time do you think you spend on a listing, actual time spent between the listing appointment, negotiating the offer, anything during the under contract and closing? How many hours?
Too many.
Well,
Like-
just ballpark.
So like from start to finish,
Yeah. I mean, okay, so let's do it this way.
12.
So you go out on the listing presentation, how long are you there?
2 hours.
Okay, so let's say you're 2 hours there.
Okay.
Then after that, you end up negotiating the contract, how long? An hour, okay, if that,
Yeah.
okay? Then after that, you do any other addendums, blah, 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 negotiate repairs, blah, blah, blah. How much? An hour?
An hour, yeah.
Then you go to closing, an hour.
An hour, yeah.
Okay, so now we're to 5. So how are you getting 12? I know, you just made it up.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so your last closing, how much money did you make off it?
13,000.
13,000. So I'm going to take 13,000 and divide that by 5 hours. So Aubrey got paid on that one $2,600 an hour. You made $2,600 an hour. Keep that in mind the next time you want to go make a flyer. And like that's where you want to go. Okay, now keep in mind, I also get it. Like you're not going to spend 100% of your time. It'd be great. That is our objective. Is we want to get to where we're because. To stop and think about that for a minute, Aubrey. You're making $2,600 an hour anytime you do one of these things. So now the objective is, I just got to do more of this. Well,
Unless it's a trailer.
well, we don't do trailers here.
Okay.
I had somebody, an agent, call me today. I got a question for you on a mobile home. I'm like, the answer is don't do it. Same thing I told you.
Yeah. Well,
Don't-
that's the thing.
well, but now you'll see why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, no. Actually, this one was actually like extremely fast. I had barely spent 30 minutes.
Okay, but how much are you gonna make?
Probably $1,700.
$1,700. But you're still gonna put in 5 hours. So now divide 1,700 by 5. How much smarter did see?
Yeah, that's
I
true.
mean, I'm somewhat,
$340.
yeah, I'm somewhat kidding. Yeah, so you can either make $2,600 an hour or 300. Which do you want?
I like the
So get away from mobile homes.
Yeah.
Okay, but notice that though.
Whole
if you-
park. I'll help.
The whole park, there you go. Now, notice that though, that's the idea. If we really understand, hey, I'm sitting here doing activities that are worth $20 an hour when I could be over here doing the ones that are gonna pay me $2,600 an hour. Well, but unfortunately, I gotta do the prospecting to get there. So now, if we then factored that into it, how many hours do you spending typically prospecting a day?
supposed to be doing like.
I know, I'm not supposed, I don't wanna know supposed to, I wanna know what for real. And in fact,
I'd say
I've
3.
probably given you this before, but for you guys that are on Zoom and for Gabe, you'll notice on the side it says power comes out of telling the truth. The reason I put that on there is if you lie, you're lying to yourself. So how many hours a day?
3.
Okay.
And 2 today so far, so.
Okay, so if we took that same, how long did it take you to close that last transaction? A month?
2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks, okay.
Really good.
So 3 hours a day times how many days a week you prospect? So 10?
Yeah.
Okay, so he did 30 hours of that. So let's take that same 13,000 and divide it by 30. So you were making basically for that deal, and I know this isn't exactly right, but if you took $13,000 and said you prospected 30 hours to get that deal, you were making $433 an hour while you were doing this. See, if you keep track of this stuff long enough, you can figure out at the end of the year, you could say, how much money did I make and how many hours total did I prospect, and divide it, and then you can be like, I get paid $400 an hour to prospect. Like if you understand that, it makes prospecting a little bit easier when you're like, okay, every hour I put in, I'm gonna make $400.
Especially if your skills get better too, I feel like.
Yeah, over time, it should get better and better and better. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, we really are done. What questions? Any other questions?
No, thanks, Russ. I really appreciate the presentation. It was wonderful.
Okay. Yeah, so here's the thing though. Just, I'm telling you, if you will keep track of your time and do it in 15-minute increments and figure out and just hold yourself accountable to, my time spent has to be, my target is to have it be 60%. What I was telling these guys before you came in, Aubrey, is Brian Burnett made $2.8 million last year.
Pretty good.
He spends basically 4 to 5 hours a day prospecting and 2 to 3 hours a day doing these things. So if he works 10 hours a day, that's still only 60%-ish. If you could get to you're doing 60% of this, you can make $2.8 million. Like, no, you don't have to change that. That's the hopefully the takeaway you guys get from this. You don't, to make $2.8 million, you don't have to work 15 hours a day and go on 35 appointments every day. Like, you got to go on 2 appointments a day. 2 appointments every day and you'll make $2.8 million. Like, it's not like you have to change. A lot of times people are like, oh yeah, but I want to have a family and I need to have a life. And Brian Burnett's home at 6 o'clock every day. Like, you can do it, but it's just, have you ever been down to the St. George office?
No.
You probably haven't either.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever go down to St. George, go into the office, he now prospects out in the open. It used to be he would be in his office. Go stand there next to him. He won't talk to you because he's prospecting. Like, you can go stand there with him. Well, and you can ask him questions, and if the phone's ringing, he'll talk to you.
Yeah.
But he doesn't stop. Like most agents, if I walked into your office, Aubrey, and I started to talk to you while you're prospecting, I'll bet you would stop prospecting and start talking to me.
Actually, I stopped doing that.
Okay, good. But
Yeah.
But Brian Burnett does not stop. Like, he'll keep dialing, and in the middle of talking to you, if they pick up the phone, he starts talking to them. Like, he doesn't stop.
Yeah.
That's how committed. If he comes up and next time he comes up here for a summit that he's going to speak at Summit, show up here to the office beforehand. You'll find him in the 3rd floor making phone calls. Like, if that ever happens, you should plan on being here at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 and go up into there and stand there and listen to him. And you can talk to him, but like I said, he won't quit calling dialing while he's talking to you. So I'm glad to hear you say that, Aubrey. All right. So hopefully your takeaway is I don't have to tweak things very much to really ramp up my income. I just got to make a few small adjustments and it'll happen. So
Yes.
cool. Okay, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Russ.
I can always count on Gabe to clap for me. I love it. Now if I can just
Thank you, Russ.
Now if I can get him to stand.
Oh,
and
yeah,
clap.
yeah.
There we go. Now, that's what I'm used to. All right, you're
My
welcome.
dogs are barking for you, Russ, so we're good.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Usually they're howling.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay, see you later.
Take care.
You guys know today's Pi Day, right?
It is probably,
And I am not a BYU fan.